Welcome to our nightly news program, coming to you live on All 24 News from Algiers. Let's check out today's top stories. Sudanese rivals delay signing of the political agreement which names the Sudanese civilian government to April 6th. Also coming up, 2 young men were killed by the Zionist forces in Al-Quds and Hebron, while others were wounded. The West is divided regarding the continued provision of military support to Ukraine, and Moscow sends more military supplies to the borderlines. Also ahead in our news. And for the first time in the history of the United States, 30 criminal charges are facing former President Donald Trump, and a historic trial in Manhattan court in New York awaits. Hello again and welcome to the details. First off in our news, Sudanese leaders have postponed the signing of an agreement planned for Saturday to resume a short-lived democratic transition to April 6th, amid continued disagreement between military factions. Here's Zahra Farjani with the report.
Sudan's military leaders and pro-democracy forces will delay the signing of an agreement to usher in a civilian government, according to a joint statement issued by both parties on Saturday. The postponement of the signing, which had been scheduled for late Saturday, comes due to the lack of consensus on a number of issues, most notably the timetable for integrating the rapid support forces into the Sudanese army.
All military and civilian parties have decided to intensify their efforts in order to solve those unresolved technical issues in a period starting tonight until the 6th of April, and to work as hard as possible to find an agreement on the point that is left unresolved before April 6th. And if the deal is concluded, then the signing will happen on April 6th.
In order to avoid any obstacles in the new way of the final political settlement, the meeting decided to focus on the issues of integrating and reforming the security and military sectors.
The meeting discussed the developments of the political process that aimed at signing the final agreement today. The parties discussed the only major point that was left unresolved, which is related to a technical case regarding the military and security reform.
In recent months, internationally brokered workshops in Khartoum have sought to find common ground over the country's thorniest political issues in the hope of signing a more inclusive final agreement. Chief among the discussion points have been security sector reform and the topic of this week's talks. However, no clear outcome has yet been reached.
Tunisian Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced on Friday that Tunisia has taken over from April 1st for a period of 1 month the presidency of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. According to a statement from the Tunisian Foreign Ministry, the country will work to realize its vision of finding peaceful, just and lasting solutions to various African problems for a secure, stable and prosperous continent. Tunisia also aims to be a force of positive recommendation to support security and stability on the continent. The head of the United Nations Support Mission to Libya, Abdullah Bathili, continues his official tour to the southern neighboring countries of Libya. After Sudan, the UN envoy visited Chad to discuss the Libyan crisis and review ways to achieve peace and stability in the region with the Chadian transitional president in the capital. Bathili is expected to arrive in Niger at the last stop of his tour. More details with Usama Ayati.
International efforts to ease the situation in Libya and the region in general continue as a means of cooperation to achieve peace and stability. The tour of the UN envoy to Libya, Abdullah Bathili, to 3 countries bordering Libya continue within a mission assigned to him by the Security Council to widen connection between Libyan parties and international community.
There is an urgent need to unify Libyan military and security institutions in order to establish peace and stability.
Bathili's visit to Sudan targeted the most serious security issues with the President of the Sovereign Council of Sudan, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. The talks underlined the necessity of withdrawing foreign fighters from Libya and the security of the Sahel borders. The leaders also discussed developments in the situation of the work of the Joint Military Committee, 5+5. Shortly after his visit to Sudan, Batili headed to Chad, where he seeks the withdrawal of foreign fighters from Libya. The UN envoy met in the capital N'Djamena, the head of the Chadian transitional period, Lieutenant General Idriss Déby Itno, as they reviewed the areas of cooperation.
It is a peace project that will include Libya and its southern neighbors, and that requires cooperation between the three countries neighboring Libya in order to ensure the withdrawal of foreign fighters and those mercenaries.
Batili headed to another destination, and this concerns Niger, with a focus on the peace project that he carries, as he is expected to arrive to Niamey to complete the effort to withdraw foreign forces from Libya and neighboring countries.
Moving on, during a consultative meeting at the headquarters of the European Parliament, the European Coordination, which supports the Western Sahara Parliamentary Group, and many other participants held Madrid responsible for not completing the decolonization of Western Sahara. More details with Salman Asib in this report.
The pressure on the Moroccan occupation and Spain is at its peak as a result of the growing support and solidarity that Sahrawi people have received regarding their right to self-determination. In fact, at the headquarters of the European Parliament in Brussels, a consultative meeting will be held between the European Coordination of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people and the parliamentary group Western Sahara in the European Parliament. During the meeting, the ambassador in charge of Europe and European Union took part, accompanied by several European parliamentarians and representatives of the European Solidarity Movement, during which he stressed that Madrid should be held historically responsible for completing the decolonization of the region, while warning the country against proceeding with betting on unacceptable colonial options that threaten the stability of the region.
I have come to meet and communicate with as many French deputies as I can to improve their knowledge about the Sahrawi people and their rights that need to be recognized and supported by the European Union. However, unfortunately, the agreements signed between the European Union and Morocco do not grant the Sahrawi people the right to make their own decisions. A great work awaits us in order to expose Moroccan corruption everywhere. Today, the European Commission has ruled that the European Union's agreement with Morocco will expire permanently on July 17th and will not be extended. And we are also hoping for a positive decision by the European Court of Justice.
In the meantime, Western Sahara continues to put pressure on the European Union to assume its responsibilities and pay off its large debt towards the Sahrawi people, especially with the approaching of the expiration date of the Hunting Agreement Protocol on July 17th.
The European Parliament Group and all countries that are in solidarity with the Sahrawi people agreed to stress on the upcoming meetings inside Europe regarding the decision that the European Court of Justice will take.
For its part, and during a meeting, human rights emphasized the need to endure visits to the occupied cities in order to lift the military barrier imposed by the Moroccan occupation in the region. The organization also highlighted the recent UN resolutions condemning Morocco for its practice of torture against Sahrawi activists.
Still with the same file, the Sahrawi ambassador in charge of Latin America and the Caribbean, Mohamed Azrouk, in a statement confirmed that the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic will apply to join as an observer country in the Ibero-American summits after the suggestion of the Colombian President Gustavo Petro that Western Sahara should be part of the summit, which includes 22 countries, despite the opposition of the Spanish government, which Mohamed Azrouk accused of becoming the official spokesman for the Moroccan occupation in such forums. The Moroccan High Commission for Planning revealed a significant decline in the country's economic growth during the last quarter of the past year, affected by the decline in the growth of the agricultural sector. To a different story now, Egypt and Syria agreed to enhance cooperation on Saturday during the first official visit by Syrian Foreign Ministry to Cairo in more than 10 years. And it represents the latest indication of reform in relations between Arab countries and Syria. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry said in a statement that the two ministers agreed to intensify communication between the two countries on various levels during the next stage, with the aim of addressing issues and topics that affect the interests of the two countries. To the Middle East now. 2 young men were killed by the Zionist forces in Al-Quds and Hebron, while others were wounded and arrested also in the city of Ramallah. The Palestinian presidency warned of an explosive situation while calling on the factions to travel to Al-Aqsa Mosque and stay there.
Zionist forces and settlers keep pushing for more violence against Palestinians and their sanctities, even during the holy month of Ramadan. Latest reports affirm that 2 Palestinians were killed by Zionist gunfire in Al-Quds and Hebron. A 24-year-old Palestinian was shot by Zionist soldiers while he was driving his vehicle. He was left bleeding helplessly until he died of his wounds. The other young Palestinian was shot dead by the occupation forces in Al-Aqsa Mosque for allegedly trying to snatch a soldier's weapon. These allegations were refuted by eyewitnesses who said that soldiers killed him after he tried to defend a Palestinian woman who was beaten by them inside the Aqsa courtyard. In other development, 2 other Palestinians were injured and dozens suffocated during clashes with the Zionist forces in the town of Beit Omar. Meanwhile, the occupation forces arrested 6 Palestinians after storming neighborhoods from Al-Quds and Ramallah. In the same context, Zionist settlers threw stones at Palestinian vehicles in southern Nablus. Such violence by settlers is a commonplace across the occupied West Bank and is never prosecuted by Zionist authorities. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, 92 Palestinians were killed by occupation forces since the beginning of the year. This situation shows how far Netanyahu's government could go with its escalatory policies, which would possibly pave the way for more attacks by Zionist extremists and soldiers against the Palestinians.
In Iraq, joint operations announced on Saturday that the security forces launched qualitative strikes against the remnants of the terrorist organization ISIS. Major General Tahsin al-Khafaji, spokesman for the Joint Operations Command, and in a media statement, said that the security forces managed to destroy the terrorist weapon sites and equipment with airstrikes in many areas, pointing to the continuation of security operations to strip terrorists of all forms of logistical support. To the war in Ukraine, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu promised to boost munition supplies to Russian forces in Ukraine during a visit to the headquarters of Moscow's troops fighting in the country. The details in this report by Sofian Kanturi.
The Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund agreed to provide Ukraine with an aid package worth $15.6 billion in the first loan granted by the institution to a country in state of war. The IMF said in statement that the agreement, which extends for 48 months, is part of the $115 billion global financial support package for Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley said that Ukraine will not be able to fully recover its territory from Russia in the near future. His statement came after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky repeatedly asserted that the Ukrainian goal was to expel the Russian forces from Ukraine.
It's a very serious and difficult military mission, but we cannot say it's impossible. And I think that this is possible in the foreseeable future or during this year. I'm not saying that this cannot be achieved. I would say it's a very difficult task.
Milley warned that the conflict in Ukraine is consuming huge rates of conventional munitions. Meanwhile, the Russian Minister of Defense announces the increasing of Russian production of ammunitions to reach the needs of Russian forces in the battlefield.
The volume of supplies of the most needed ammunition has been determined. Necessary measures are being taken to increase them. It includes both conventional and high precision of weapons. All this makes it possible to fulfill the tasks set by the Commander-in-Chief in the plan for conducting the special military operation.
The German defense minister acknowledged that his nation's arsenal has become constrained, but he also said that the most recent military cooperation with the Netherlands will enable both nations to continue supplying Ukraine.
Germany and the Netherlands stand firmly with Ukraine. We cooperate closely on many initiatives in this regard and complement each other's activities, be it training for Ukrainian service women and men or delivering equipment. Together, we are sending a clear signal.
Despite the Western division on supply in Ukraine, a nuclear threat has approached to Kiev's bottle. This comes after Kim Yoo-jong, the influential sister of North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, accused Ukraine of calling for nuclear weapons based on an online petition there that has received fewer than 1,000 signatures so far.
Still with the same file, former Russian diplomat Alexander Zastkin said in a statement to our channel that major and fundamental shifts Russia has witnessed in its conflict with the West and the ongoing war in Ukraine have accelerated its review of its foreign policy. Let's take a listen.
Big changes have been made in new Russian foreign policy because the confrontation between Russia and the West have moved from politics to the war in Ukraine where the West is fighting Russia. It was necessary for Russia to change its doctrine, despite the fact that the change happens every 5 years approximately. The last version was in 2021, but now it's necessary to adapt the policy into the new changes.
In the same context, Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed an order to endorse Russia's updated foreign policy concept, which was compiled and presented by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The new concept was updated to incorporate additional measures and redefine parameters of necessary actions, especially against consistent United States, Western, and European confrontation, and determine important roles in the emerging multipolar world by the Russian Federation. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that Kiev is seeking to communicate with the Chinese authorities to discuss his proposed peace plan on Saturday. Zelensky added in a joint conference with the leaders of Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, and Moldova that everything must be done to involve the largest number of countries in winning this war.
As far as the Chinese leader is concerned, I think this is the case. One of those leaders is hesitating. Let's put this aside. And I think it's very important for us to do everything we can to involve as many countries as possible in the victory over the war itself. We send signals and say we are ready to meet and talk. We are waiting for an answer.
During the UN Security meeting on Friday, China called on nuclear weapon nations to reduce the risk of nuclear war amid Russia's suspension of the New START treaty with the United States. The meeting was held following Russia's announcement on March 25th that it plans to station tactical nuclear weapons in neighboring Belarus. The UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs also briefed the meeting on the situation and warned of the risk of a nuclear weapon being used is currently higher than at any time since the depths of the Cold War.
Mutual trust and coordination among major countries is the fundamental guarantee for maintaining global strategic stability. In January last year, the leaders of the 5 nuclear weapon states issued a joint statement emphasizing that nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought, and reaffirming that none of the nuclear weapons are targeted at each other or at any other state. Against the backdrop of the current tense relations among the nuclear weapon states, the special significance of this historic statement is all the more prominent. China calls on all nuclear weapon states to abide by the vision of the statement, effectively reduce the risk of nuclear war, and avoid any armed conflict between nuclear weapon states.
To other developments in Europe now, the Greek Prime Minister called on the European Union on Friday on the sidelines of his visit to this border in Paris in the northeast of the country to consider providing European funding and expending for this type of project and a metal fence on the land borders between Greece and Turkey to prevent the crossing of migrants, as he referred to his country's contribution to European security as well as a more effective European asylum policy. Moving on, but still in Europe, the lush region of Asturias in eastern or northern Spain was ravaged by more than 90 wildfires on Friday. Most of them were believed to have been started by arsonists, whom the region's leader called fire terrorists. Dozens of fires have already been put out by emergency services in Asturias and the neighboring region of Cantabria over the past 2 days. As for their part, over 600 firefighters were deployed to tackle the blazes, and several towns have been evacuated as police closed off roads and highways.
We're making a fire break so that when the fire comes, as we have been told that it's coming virulently from the villages below, that it will have this break and not reach the farm we have above us. Our objective is to save this farm right now. We have to save the villages because this is very complicated. We can see how this is advancing.
To the United States now, former President Donald Trump faces about 30 criminal charges related to alleged document fraud in the indictment issued against him by a New York grand jury. The historic step prosecutors took on Thursday by filing the criminal charges against him marks the first time an indictment that has been brought against any former U.S. president. Trump and his supporters have already alleged that the charges are politically motivated, a charge that they could repeat before the judge. And for more on African stories, here's the news in brief.
The regional authorities in Yatanga said in a statement that the village of Kosuka was attacked by armed group, killing 6 people, including full volunteers to help the army, pointed out that military aircraft tracked the attackers while they were fleeing from the site of the crashes and killed several of them. The attack came one day after the dismantling of a large base of armed groups in Majumdar, near the border with Côte d'Ivoire.
The transitional president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, appointed new officials at the head of the army as part of the country's transitional authorities' plan to combat terrorist groups and regain control of their strongholds.
The president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, appointed a new chief of army staff in his country, which is facing acts of terrorist violence in several regions. Major General Abdou Sadiq Issa became the new chief of staff, succeeding Major General Salifou Moudi, who has held the position since 2020.
Police say at least 14 people were killed in Somalia, including 8 civilians. Militants from a Shabab group, which said it was behind the attack, had been holed up in one of the rooms in the La Villa Rise Hotel.
Well, that's the end of our program. For more stories, you can always go to our social media platforms. Thanks for keeping it on our channel. Enjoy the rest of our programs and take care for now.